18 years ago, a terrorist attack hit the United States and shocked the world. Canadians reached out with compassion and care. And I want to just take a moment to acknowledge those who lost their life, the friends and family that continue to be impacted by that loss, and the first responders who responded so courageously. Friends, we're here in London, beautiful city, a city I spent 5 years of my life when I went to Western. I got to say it was a city where I had some of my best memories and some of my toughest. This is the city where my brother came to live with me. I took him in, and I took care of him. It's a time when we went through a lot of struggles. I had to work a lot of jobs to make ends meet. And it was during that time that a lot of friends and family stepped up and helped me out. They helped out with food and with support. And it reminded me of a very Canadian value. I wouldn't have got through those tough times without their support. And that's what Canadians believe in. We believe in taking care of one another. Now, you all know I love Canada. And I believe we can make it even better. Earlier today, I had a chance to speak with Jessica, Nancy, and Jack. Now, Jessica is pregnant and a cancer survivor. And she told me about how difficult it was and how difficult it is for her to afford the medication that she needs without the coverage. It's crushing. I met Nancy and Jack, who are both retired, and they told me about how they continue to worry about out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. They don't know when the next expense is going to come up. They don't know how much it's going to cost for dental care or if they need new glasses, and they're worried. Now, I believe we can do better for people like Nancy, Jack, and Jessica. But we can do that only if we have the courage to take on the powerful interests at the very top. We can expand our Medicare system to include medication for all, pharmacare for all, and extend it beyond that to include dental care, vision and hearing care, and mental health services. We can do that, but only if we have the courage to take on the lobbyists and the corporate interests. We can build 500,000 new affordable homes across this country and tackle the housing crisis. We can do that, but only if we have the courage to take on money launderers and speculators that keep on driving the cost of housing. And we can provide a relief for Canadians who are paying some of the highest costs in the world for cell phones and internet services. We can do that, but only if we have the courage to take on the big telecom lobbyists. And we can fight now. We can act now to take on the climate crisis and build 300,000 new quality jobs, but only if we have the courage to take on the big polluters and to end the fossil fuel subsidies.
We are living in a country where rich people are richer. A country where the majority of the population does not have access to the same advantages or same benefits. A country where the conservatives and the liberals in government have created a system that benefits to the rich and let go of the rest.
4 years ago, Justin Trudeau charmed us with pretty words and empty promises. He said the right things, but he didn't do them. Behind closed doors, Justin Trudeau does whatever the wealthy and powerful corporations want him to do. It's clear Justin Trudeau isn't who he pretended to be. And Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives are not the answer. They're going to cut taxes for the wealthy, but they're going to cut services that you and your families count on. You'll pay the price with even more expensive health care, an even more expensive medication, and an even worsening climate crisis. Mes amis, à chaque élection, les
My friends, every election, liberals and conservatives give us a series of promises, but too often, they don't keep their words. When it's time to choose between the interests of the population and those of the big multinationals, their choice is clear. They choose the interests of the oil companies and the pharma industry. When we want different results, we need to make different choices. In this election is a clear choice. Who can you count on to fight for you?
So this election comes down to a really clear question. Who can you count on to fight for you? When I was a kid, that's right. When I was a kid, I never imagined that someone that looked like me would be running to be prime minister. People told me time and time again the things that I couldn't do. But now, kids run up and say, seeing you do this, I feel like I can do anything. And that's inspirational. We have an exciting opportunity over the next 40 days. We are going to bring a hopeful message to Canadians that we can build the country of our dreams. A country where everyone has a place to call home. Healthcare when they need it. Clean water to drink and clean air to breathe. Good jobs and a bright future. You know, everywhere I go, I meet hardworking people who wanted to be treated fairly and want to build a good life for themselves and their family. These are the people New Democrats have always worked for. These are the people I'm in it for. Thank you. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to take any of your questions.
I have a question.
We'll start right here.
CTV News over here, Kevin Gallagher. So, Mr. Singh, launching your campaign, the polling numbers that we see, of course, are lower than those when Tom Mulcair was voted out of the party. Pundits are saying the party's in trouble, that you're going to have a very difficult time holding on to what you have in the House of Commons. What's your strategy given that context?
Well, we're looking at what's going on right now in Canada. And what I'm hearing from people is that they're done with governments that seem to continually prioritize making it easier for the very rich and making it harder for them. They want someone who's going to stand up and expand our healthcare system. The questions that I keep on hearing about how hard it is to pay for medication really plague me. And I think about the fact that we are in this position because governments have chosen to make it easier for big pharma instead of making it easier for people. And I'm confident that people will see in us champions who want to put them at the center and heart of everything we do.
On that subject of affordability, of course, we're in London, Ontario, home of General Dynamics, the contract that has the labs going to Saudi Arabia, a contract that you would cancel if you're prime minister. What would you say to workers here that depend on those types of contracts for their livelihoods?
I'd say to those workers that Canada has a lot of needs in our own military services, that there's a lot of need that we could satisfy, a lot of contracts we could satisfy here in Canada. And those hardworking people should continue to have those contracts here in Canada or in jurisdictions where there's not an oppressive regime like in Saudi Arabia. If there's any example of a time when we should be canceling an arms deal, it's in the example where we've got a country that's alleged to have committed murder of a journalist, that's involved in an ongoing killing of the people of Yemen, and that has been implicated in horrible human rights violations of its own citizens. This is a case that calls out for ending that agreement, but continuing with contracts here in Canada so that we continue to maintain those jobs.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh, Christian Noël de Radio-Canada.
It seems now that... Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of your question. Hello. The RCMP seems to have a hard time interrogating people in the SNC-11 case. If it was possible to interview these people, do you think we would learn something new, really? Yes, of course, because what we've heard from the ministers is that they have things to share, but because they don't have the right to share their story, they don't have the opportunity to share this their story with the ethics commissioner. And what we heard from the report of the ethics commissioner, he was approached by ministers. They wanted to share their version of the story, but they couldn't because of the fact that they don't have the right to do so. You want to be the champion of the everyday Canadian. The Liberals and Conservatives also want to help the middle class. Conservatives and the Liberals seems to have a campaign that is completely national. On your side, the means look to be smaller. Maybe you'll be more regionalized in your campaign. Why should people vote for you if you have less chances of forming the government? We will have a national campaign. We will travel across the country, but we want... Of course, the Conservatives said that they will be there for everyday Canadians, but what's the summary of what they did? They cut services when people need them, and always cutting services like health services, education. We see the proof here in Ontario. They've cut every services that people needed. So it's clear what they will do. If we look at what the Liberals did, they always talk about the priority of the population, but they give priority to the big companies. Both Liberals and Conservatives choose the priorities of the big companies, and that's what we're saying for this election. Who can fight for you? And what I'm saying is the NDP, who has always shown this will to work for everyday Canadians.
Singh, Hannah Thibodeau with CBC National News. I just want to ask you, following up to Kevin's question, you say that, we're talking about problems with the campaign already as we head in. What do you personally have to do to move forward and get over a lot of these hurdles?
Well, we're showing people right now with our commitments. We're committed to changing the way things are done in politics. We want to do things differently, and I believe it can be done. We've seen the past number of years, the record has been that governments in Ottawa really haven't responded to the needs of people. I'll give you one concrete example. When it comes to the cost of medication, something that is plaguing Canadians, something that people are worried about, and we look at the commitments made by Mr. Trudeau, he promised to reduce the cost of medication by a simple change that would have just set a list of different countries to compare our prices to. He abandoned that commitment, and we wonder why. Well, in 4 years, he met with the pharmaceutical lobbyist over 875 times, the great corporate interest lobbyists. And as a result of that, he abandoned a commitment. That's a choice. That's not a happenstance or a coincidence. What we're saying to Canadians is this. We are committed to fighting the powerful interests and making sure people's needs are put first. And that's what we bring.
But I don't think that answered the question about you personally and the hurdles you personally have to overcome in this campaign.
Okay, sure. Sure, I faced hurdles in my life historically, and I face hurdles maybe now. But it's no different for many people in Canada who face hurdles and barriers because of their own identity. Women continue to face barriers in advancements in their careers. They're underrepresented in almost every sector. When you look at those at the higher echelon, whether it's in the corporate culture, whether it's in academia, women are underrepresented. People are faced with barriers because of their sexuality, because of the language they speak, because of their identity, their religion. Those are challenges that many Canadians face. And I can say that maybe I experience a little bit of what people go through, and I hope people can see in me someone that understands those realities and wants to build a country where there are no barriers, where no one has to face these barriers based on who they are. They can be celebrated for who they are, and they can achieve the best that they can in their lives.
Alex Ballingall with the Toronto Star. The bulk of your platform's been out for now a few months, and there's some pretty big, likely expensive promises in it. When will Canadians see a full costing of the NDP's platform so they can judge whether what you're promising is feasible or possible?
Well, in terms of feasibility, it's really a matter of choices. I mean, if you look at the past year, Mr. Trudeau didn't do a feasibility study before he cut the corporate tax rate by $14 billion to allow the wealthiest corporations to buy corporate jets and limousines. He didn't study that, he made a choice. He didn't really ask people or consult whether Canada could afford to buy a pipeline, and he spent $4.5 billion on a pipeline. That's almost $20 billion in money that was spent to help out the wealthiest, not to help out Canadians. We would make different choices. With the resources we have, we take it very seriously. We take our budget very seriously. But we would invest in things like universal pharmacare for all, building the housing that people need, making sure people are put at the center of what we do. We also have put forward some of our measures. So we're working with the Parliamentary Budget Office to put out the costing. And one of the things that we've announced recently is to pay for some of our promises, we're ready to increase revenue. And to do that, we're asking the people at the very top to pay a little more. And so we put forward a super wealth tax, which is a tax on those who've got fortunes of over 20 million. The PBO has announced that that would raise in the first year close to $6 billion, and eventually it could build up to about $10 billion. That's a commitment to raise funds to enact our promises.
As I'm sure you know, Pierre Nantel yesterday, a former NDP MP, basically was saying that if there was a referendum, he would vote for Quebec separation. It should happen as soon as possible. I'm wondering what you think of that, and what, if you have any concerns that somebody who obviously believes in splitting Canada apart felt at home in the NDP for so many years.
Well, I mean, with New Democrats, you know what you get. We are a party that believes in working extremely hard to keep this beautiful country together. But at the same time, we understand that Quebec is a unique nation, that it's a unique place, and that's something that's very special. We celebrate that. What we will do as a New Democratic Party is make sure that everyone in our country, all the provinces, all the territories, all the nations, the First Nations, everyone feels that in Canada they will get justice, they will get fairness, they can build a good life. That's what we're committed to doing.
Hi. Hi, I'm Colin Butler. I'm with the local CBC here in London. You probably noticed it on your way in. London has a pretty visible problem. It has a huge problem with poverty, drugs. The only city that hands out more needles than we do is Vancouver. So if you were to become prime minister, if your party were to gain power, even if it had a deciding vote in a minority parliament, how would it help clean up a problem that's extremely visible here, where there's mental health and drug problems that no one seems to be able to solve?
You touched on a problem that is really rampant across Canada, but yes, you see it here in London. And there's a couple of reasons why we're faced with this problem. One, there's a massive gap when it comes to mental health services. It's one of the elements of our healthcare that's really neglected in our healthcare system. And so one of our responses to that is we believe that if someone needs mental health care, if they need addiction care, if they need rehab services, they should be able to access that. And it shouldn't mean that only those who've got private insurance can get into a rehab facility. What I really believe is that if we develop a head-to-toe healthcare coverage, it should include massive investments in rehab and addiction services. It should also include supports for mental health services so that people can get the care they need. What we have now is a national crisis when it comes to opioids and drug use. We need to respond to that crisis as a national crisis, and as well with a healthcare response to help the people that are dying, to help the people that need help and care, and we can do if we make better choices.
But how do you make people care about that? I mean, there's people who they're in full-blown psychosis in the middle of the downtown, and everybody ignores it. I mean, no one's talking about this in the race. So how do you make that a priority so that everybody's talking about it?
Yeah, so what I've called for is, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is a national crisis. If there was thousands of people dying as a result of Zika, we would have immediately mobilized the entire country with mobile centers to respond to that. Right now, there is a national crisis where thousands of Canadians are dying because of opioid use. It should be treated like a national crisis. I'm calling for that. On day one of a new Democratic government, we would declare a public health emergency nationally, which would open up a lot of services and supports to provide care at the front level, at the front lines. In addition, we would say we should approach this in a different way. When people are dealing with addictions, these are folks that are dealing with mental health, they're dealing with addiction, they're dealing with poverty. The solution isn't to put them in jail. The solution is to provide them with care. with rehab, with addiction services, so that we can solve the problem and not just continually deal with the symptoms. We care about people, and we're going to respond in a way that shows how much we care and how much we can do when we work together.
Mr. Singh, Mike Couture with Global National. I wanted to ask you, the latest numbers that we have from your party today is that you have 253 candidates nominated. You started your campaigning earlier. You're still well short of the 338 you need. How can you make inroads if you don't even have a full roster yet?
We will have 338 candidates so that everyone in Canada can vote for a New Democrat no matter where they live. We've had some challenges, but we're ready to solve that, and we will absolutely have candidates in every riding.
I also want to follow up and talk about the challenges you face. One of them will be in Quebec, Bill 21. Obviously, the secularism bill is going to be an uphill battle for yourself.
The black cat.
How do you make inroads in a place that used to be a fortress for the NDP, where you want to be the prime minister of this country, but you might not be able to be hired as a teacher in that province?
Yeah, I mean, that is a challenge. And I think about a lot of the people that I meet in Montreal, a lot of young women that I've met who love science and love teaching and want to become a teacher, and now because of this bill can't. And it upsets me. It saddens me. It's a divisive law. It state sanctions discrimination. It says that it's okay to discriminate. We say, you shouldn't discriminate someone by the way they look. There's a law that says you're allowed to, and in fact, it's now a law to discriminate people because of the way they look. That's sad and that's hurtful.